Hello everyone. Hopefully you can see me, hear me okay, the usual dig. I noticed something about my camera. I'm like really washed out. Like if I stand in a certain spot, I get really washed out. I don't know if I like messed with my focal length or what on there, but if anybody knows more about cameras than me, which is pretty much everyone, let me know. Like, yeah, see right here? See how like this is really harsh? I feel like it was dialed in a little bit better the other in previous streams. Like, yeah, if I stand in like this lighting, yeah, there it is, like this lighting trifecta, this perfect angle between my two lights. If I'm over here, see, that's not so bad. But if I move, which I do during my streams, whew, washed out big time. Anyway, whoa, that got zoomed in. Okay, let's recap with what's going on. Third, final stream this time. I didn't actually expect to do so many streams, but I kind of wanna give this just one more chance. So for those that are joining live today or just catching up or whatever, I did make a PR for that original idea that we had in the very first stream. This model policy fallback. So again, for those that maybe didn't watch the first stream or because it was a couple weeks ago and lots happened, let me just kind of recap. Typically, I find model policies to be pretty redundant, as I say here in the PR. Like if you take a look at like the cruddy methods, you're kind of just like, user matches the model user ID and user matches the model ID, and you do this for update and delete and all the other things, and then maybe you have something everybody can create. It kind of just looks pretty basic like this. I thought a fallback method similar to route fallback would be kind of cool and help you kind of streamline this to basically just be able to say, hey, that model policy in like the most basic sense, if it's any of the create stuff, true. Otherwise, see if it matches, the model user ID, right? So one little method to kind of rule them all if you don't define the other specific method. This ended up getting closed. It was kind of a generic close, but I ended up messaging Taylor because, again, I like the idea. And he basically had kind of said, policies and authorization can kind of just be this like really dense topic. And he didn't really want to add yet another kind of nuance to it, right? Oh, if I define fallback, then, and I don't define update, but I have before, like what's the chain there? And I think if you did the stream and you like the idea, like that's not so hard to follow, but it's probably hard for new users, right? For newcomers to authorization, it just adds yet another kind of nuance to it. So that makes sense. That's fine. Here's what I want to hack on today, though. This got closed. I'm not going to try to like reopen this in some other capacity under some other name. But what's interesting was actually one of the comments. This guy comments, or person, I don't know if it's a guy or girl. They comment on everything. But basically they're like, can't you just use call? Kind of. Yes and no. This fallback would formalize it in a documentable way and provide kind of like named parameters, whereas call's just going to say name and then arguments, and you got to pluck those out and know the order. So if nothing else, this formalizes it. But I also actually, in thinking about this more, I don't think you can just use call right now. So that's what I want to mess with on the stream. Can I just use call and achieve my own version of callback? Can I kind of hack it on my own? And if I can, then there's opportunity maybe in a trait or something to formalize that again on my own in a package, as Taylor kind of generically, when he closes these, kind of just has this canned response of like, hey, if you think it's cool, like make a package. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing with a lot of these things that got closed, because I like them. As I mentioned in the second stream hacking on these, like I like this stuff. I'm a 10-year developer of Laravel. Like there's just some things I just kind of want to do, and I understand if they're maybe not for the 80%, but I think I'm going to wrap them up into a package after the Laravel 12 release and target that. But I want to test this. I don't think this is right. I don't think you can just use call, unfortunately, because as we talked about in the first stream, there's some restrictions that got added in, I think it's like Laravel 7 maybe. There's kind of an undocumented restriction that the method, the actual calling ability, for example, the actual calling ability, like update. If you say gate update and pass in, you know, post or model, whatever it is, that update method has to exist. That's a requirement of the framework. And that update method doesn't exist when you're using call, or at least I don't believe so. So let's prove that though. So I'm gonna kind of look at the changes. There's really actually very minimal changes that happened here. You basically just kind of overrode that whole point of seeing if that method ability was available and said, or it has callback, or it has fallback. And then if it did, and policy method didn't exist or return null or whatever, then go ahead and call the policy fallback. So, I mean, 20 lines of code made this work. But again, I think it's the mental overhead of why this maybe wasn't the greatest. So, or wasn't merged. So let's do this. Let's do composer update. I just want to kill any of like the hacks. We're working in like our own little project here instead of the framework directly. It just makes it easier to test. So let me just run composer update, make sure I don't have any like tweaks here. And this is going to give us back to a fresh Laravel 11 application. So I want to test, can I just put call here and will this work? So if we go back to, I think we have this demo. Yeah, here we go. We have this demo Laravel ideas. I wonder if I can just like Command Z way back. Nope. Okay. I think what we had was like gate authorize, and we can just give this some kind of like random ability. We just say something like, you know, whatever, random ability, right? And we don't have to pass it, I don't think, anything else. But we will need to be in. So let's get rid of this form request. We're kind of hacking on stuff left and right here. Let's put this back so there's no form request validation. Let's go back into web. And I think we had this login. We made a user. We redirected them to slash. This goes here now. So we're authenticated. If I go to login first, I'll automatically get logged in, which means I'm able to be authorized under this random ability. So right now I would expect a 403 because, again, in default Laravel 11, none of the tweaks, this would just throw a 403 because you're not authorized, because the gate, technically the gate doesn't exist is the reason you're not authorized. So let's just kind of let's play this out for a second. So composer, run dev. We probably don't need the whole gamut of run dev, but yeah, I don't need all that. Let's just go old school. PHP artisan serve. I don't need to like hot watch and all that stuff. Okay, so let's go to login. Oh, I made it get, didn't I? I think I made this post. Let's go back to get. Let's go back here, refresh. Connection refused, port. Oh, I think I was attempting to mess with Postgres the other day. Where was that? .env? Yeah. Let's just say SQLite. Let's rerun this. I think it picks up, yeah, it picks up environmental changes. I always forget if it gets that or not. It used to not pick up environmental changes. Okay, yeah, 403, this action is unauthorized. Okay, so just to prove that we're on the right track, let's get back into our user policy and let's make a public, oh my goodness, public function random ability. And we'll just say this automatically gets user, if I can type, holy cow, user. There we go. And then let's just return true. So what I would expect now, if we just go here and we dd hello, we should see hello now is what I would think. So let's go back, we'll refresh. We're still forbidden. Did I not camel case something correctly? Let's see here. Random ability, user, true. Let's get rid of this before. It might be confusing stuff. Oh, I'm hearing a lot of beeps in the chat, so I must be doing something wrong. Let's go back here, refresh. Nope. I think, do you have to pass this something? I always forget. I don't use policies a whole lot, but again, when I do, I'm not very impressed. Let's see here. Hello, hello, hello. Hey, everybody. Cool. Okay, so I'm not doing something obviously dumb. I thought the chat was blowing up because... Okay, so random ability. Let's just... I think it's snake cases or camel cases. I always forget. Let's just kind of avoid that, though. Okay, 403 not authorized. Where are we getting? Let's just call this random, just to avoid any naming collisions. Random. Oh, do you have to pass it? I think you have. It doesn't know what policy. I think we have to say user class. I think we have to say that. I don't think it knows the policy. It just is kind of blanketly getting rid of it. There we go. Hello. Okay, cool. So that's what I expected. Now, if we go back here, and let's uncomment this. It was interesting that we were never getting in before. We should see policy before. Now, let me get rid of random. And I think what we'll see is a 403. We won't even see a dump. I'll explain why, but we won't even see the dump policy before, and we'll just get a blanket 403. So let me refresh this. Yes, blanket 403. We don't get the dump before anymore. And this is the point. We're going to try call here in a second, but this is the point. If the method for the ability that you're attempting to authorize for is not defined, Laravel doesn't even try. It doesn't call before, even if before would have been like is admin and the user's an admin and it would have passed. It doesn't even try anymore. And that I think is what prevents us from doing these kind of super user things where we can streamline a policy. So let me prove this now. I'm not going to uncomment random. I'm going to leave before. What I'll define is public. I'll define the magic method. Public function call. I believe it gets name and then arguments. And let's dump name. Let's see if call can actually work, because what that would mean, and I don't think this is true, but what it would mean is that this method is callable, returns true for magic methods. I don't think that's the case. I don't think so. I could be wrong. Maybe that's just the way PHP works. We'll read the docs here in a second, but I don't think so. Oh, how did we get here? Did we get dump name? No, we just got policy before. We got policy before and hello. Is policy, oh, this is returning true now. False. Do we get random now? No, we don't. We don't get random. Why would we not get call? It doesn't know to call. This is interesting. This is more nuanced than I thought it would be. Oh, sorry, not false. Null. You have to let it fall through. Again, I get what Taylor's saying. There's a lot of nuance when you start to use these methods. So I understand adding one more, such as fallback, is a little bit crazy. But can this work? It can. It can. Okay, do we get the arguments? Dump. Whoa. I'm not typing today. Dump arguments. What do we get from this? We get the user. We get the user that has been authorized. You don't get the model class. See, that's interesting. That's interesting. Hold on a second. Okay, I want to dig deeper into this, but first let's make sure we're understanding it correctly. Let's get rid of before. I don't care about arguments so much. Let's go here. We're getting random and we're getting 403. Now, can I return true from here? Return true. And do I pass? I do, of course. Okay, so it's attempting to call random. Random doesn't exist, but we have call. So what that means to me is deep down in the policy land, in here, deep down in here, when it looks for is callable, does is callable return true for magic methods? I would not have expected PHP to do that. I mean, I can see it both ways. I did not know that about PHP though. Let's go take a look. Let's go learn some stuff. Is callable. Verify that a value can be called as a function in the current scope. Okay, cool. Receives the callable name. Note, however, okay. Does it say anything about magic, its behavior for magic methods? Notes, an object, okay, here we go. If an object implements call, then this function will return true for any method on that object, even if the method is not defined. Wonderful. I did not know that. Does method exist? Maybe that's the difference between method exists and callable. Maybe that's the nuance here. I noticed when I was working on this PR that they used both. Let's see what method exists does. Maybe method exists is the more strict one. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Are there any cool notes here? Let's see here. Does anybody mention call in here? Okay, here we go. As noted elsewhere, method exists does not care about the existence of call, whereas is callable does. Aha, aha. Okay, so look at this. They use is callable in here, but they also use method exists, but only on before. That is deeply nuanced. Wow. So using call does actually work the way fallback would. It's a little ugly. Again, it's still not formalized, but it does work, but it would never be called for before. Before has to strictly exist as a method. And that makes sense. Again, very nuanced, but it makes sense. You wouldn't want to call twice, right? Before is a very specific method, and the nature in which it's called first should only happen if it truly exists, whereas the other stuff, any other additional ability, should be called, no matter what, no matter if the method exists or not. And because they use is call, this is the only place they use method exists. One of one search results. Method exists only for before. Everything else in here uses is callable. All three other places, policy method, the callback itself, resolve policy callback, right here, here's the strict part. Without call, earlier, like we saw, random wasn't being called if it wasn't defined because it's not here. But because we've thrown a callable in here, so here's kind of the weird part about this, and here's why I was using random dash ability earlier. Here's kind of where, okay, it works, but it's really not. It itself now has a lot of nuance. So let me do this. We get random. Notice that we get random ability, capital. We don't get the original name of our policy, or sorry, of our ability, right? We get the snake or the camel cased version. So I like the formalization of fallback because you have this kind of formalized method signature where you get the user followed by the ability, the original ability name, in our case random dash ability, then any model, potentially. You may not have a model for some things, such as create, and then additional arguments that are passed in. And that's kind of the next piece I want to look at with call. Can you make call work? Yes. But again, you really, really have to be a power user to know that the name you're going to get is camel cased. And as we're going to see here in a second, the arguments that you get are packed in a certain order. So let's just kind of look at this real quick. If I want to pack in additional arguments, I'm pretty sure these aren't comma separated. I'm pretty sure you have to make these an array, but I don't think that's variadic. So let's see here. So let's go back to dumping arguments. And let's go back and refresh this. And I don't think we'll see 1, 2, 3. No, we only get the very first thing. So let's go back here. Let me pack these in an array of arguments. Let's refresh. We should get 1, 2, 3 now. We do. But here's the thing. We didn't, technically speaking, we passed in the arguments of user class, right? The string reference of the policy name. In this case, it's not a a model-backed policy, if you will. So like, you're going to get the authenticated user as the first argument, not necessarily the argument we get passed in. So I would expect to see 3 things here, right? The authenticated user, the user class reference, and then 1, 2, 3. But we don't, because the gate underneath strips that out for us, because it assumes it's going to call a method that exists. So again, just some more nuances of this call behavior that like you really have to know how the policy works underneath. You can streamline your policies by using call, but you really have to understand how gates work underneath, and if that changes at all, I mean, suddenly all your authorization could be weird. So again, that's why I liked formalizing this, but it's nice to know, it was a fun exercise to know that call does work. It's much more of a hack. You have to have a lot of power user, like depth of knowledge of how the gate class actually works underneath. So for example, it will camel case the ability name. It automatically strips class argument for non-model methods. Non-model abilities. I forget what they actually call that. What's the real name of this? Because again, I may wrap this up in a package, just some kind of trait you could throw on your models that gives you a formalized fallback, so you don't have to call it like yourself. Let's see, Laravel policies. I forget what they call that. I think they call it, methods without models. Here you go. So it automatically strips class name argument for methods without models. So that's like create and store and whatever else, right? Really just those 2, I think. So if you were gonna build fallback and put it in a package, here's what you'd do. You'd have a trait that you added to your policies that says something like use with fallback, right? So up here I would say something like use with fallback. Whoops. And inside of that trait, I would put in call. And what I would attempt to do is unpack this stuff to remove the nuance, the knowledge required, the depth of knowledge required of this gate class and what it does. I would strip that back out and then effectively, say this arrow fallback, and I'd call it with the original ability name and then, the model and then ... arguments, right? I would kind of undo what the gate class does for us, so you could expect in a more, developer friendly way, the original ability name, for create and store, it would go back to stripping it out, but at least it would break those arguments up, so you would have to know. So inside of this with fallback, it would basically just have the call method and then the fallback method just empty. And if you added this to your class, then the understanding is you put fallback in here and work on it just the way the PR would. So I think that's what I'll do. It was a fun exercise to know that you can use call, and that is actually a pretty cool nuance of not only PHP, a difference between is callable and method exists, but again, the fact that this was already kind of in there. So I'm not sure if that commenter knew that. But again, it's like a yes and a no. Yes, you can use call, but you really better know how the gate stuff is going to give you those arguments, what arguments you're going to get in that magic method, right? So that's pretty interesting. So I think that's good. I don't think there's a lot more I want to actually hack on for Laravel 12. The reality is Laravel 12 is a pretty small release. There's not a lot of like specific features in it, and Taylor has touted like no breaking changes. You're still going to have your core file changes. You're still going to have dependency hell. You're still going to have stuff. But there's not a lot of like big sweeping changes in it. And I think because of that, some of these things, while they might, who knows? For Laravel 13, fallback might be, I might try it again and it might get in there is kind of the ultimate point I'm making. So I think 2 weeks away from the release, or less than 2 weeks now, like, I don't think there's going to be anything that gets merged, especially if it has any kind of breakages, because again, Taylor has already kind of touted Laravel 12 as not having any breaking changes. So the point of that is twofold. One, I may try this again for Laravel 13, but in the meantime, because people expressed an interest in this, and because I want the stuff I talked about kind of in part 2, and there's been some other PRs of late of mine that have been closed that I think I would use them. We talked kind of about the status codes as well. I think after the Laravel 12 release, I'll do a live stream where I make a package. Just kind of like a Laravel additions package. Kind of like my test assertions, where I've added a couple of test assertions that I think have value that have just never made it into the framework. In fairness, I haven't tried in a long time. But I think I'll do that. And I think one of them will be this policy where it's like use with fallback, right? Like, or whatever the name is. Who knows what the name is? If you feel strongly about the name, tell me in the chat or message me. But I got a handful of comments of people that were interested in this thing. So I think there's something to be said for streamlining policies, right? Because again, a lot of it looks like this. It's just so redundant. So while I don't want to use a magic call method, that feels kind of hacky to me, I would use something like a fallback method with a trait. And again, that could easily, as Taylor's noted, that could easily be, third party. So, thumbs up here. Like, let's just do that in the future. So anyway, this was fun. This was educational for me. Even using PHP 20 years, I did not know that nuance between is callable and method exists. It makes perfect sense in reading it, but I didn't think that out of the box. So that was cool. Anyway, let me check the chat and we'll shut it down here. Cool. Hey everybody, yeah, okay, yeah. Thanks everybody for joining live. And next Wednesday, yeah, it's not released yet. Laravel 12's on the 24th. So we'll just do another random stream next week. Probably something to do with Shift and the Laravel 12 release. So see y'all then.